Alien woman bathing in a lake screams, "Sir, someone just stole my clothes." Ethan had always dreamed of exploring new worlds, but nothing could prepare him for the lush beauty of this uncharted planet. The moment his ship touched down, the unfamiliar sounds of alien creatures and the fresh scent of strange flora greeted him. He had landed on a planet far from Earth, a place where no human had ever set foot before. He was here for research, a mission to collect samples of the unique wildlife and plant life, but something about the place called to him in a way he couldn't explain. As he set off through the thick forest, the dense canopy above him allowed only slivers of sunlight to pierce through. The trees were tall, their trunks twisted and covered with vines that seemed to hum with life. Ethan moved carefully, making sure to document every plant he passed, noting their strange colors and patterns. He had no idea what kind of discoveries awaited him, but that was part of the thrill. It felt like being the first human to ever walk on this world, a true explorer. After hours of trekking through the forest, Ethan stumbled upon something unexpected. He had been following a narrow stream, taking in the cool breeze when he noticed something shimmering in the distance. As he approached, the trees began to thin, and he found himself standing at the edge of a small, serene lake. The water was crystal clear, with a soft glow emanating from beneath the surface. The surroundings were silent except for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of alien birds. But it wasn't the beauty of the lake that caught Ethan's attention. It was what, or rather, who, was standing in the water. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. There, in the middle of the lake, was a figure, her skin shimmering with a soft, iridescent glow, as though it reflected the light of distant stars. Her hair, long and flowing, appeared to ripple like liquid silver. She seemed to be bathing, her movements graceful, almost as if she were part of the water itself. Ethan froze. He didn't know what to do. The sight of this alien woman, so different from anything he had ever seen, was both mesmerizing and completely unexpected. For a moment he just watched, unsure whether he should leave or stay. The alien woman hadn't noticed him yet. But then, out of nowhere, she turned suddenly, her eyes locking with his. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to stop. Then, in a voice that rang through the air, she screamed, "Sir, someone just stole my clothes." The scream startled Ethan so much that he nearly fell backward into the bushes behind him. The alien woman, now fully aware of his presence, quickly covered herself with her arms and began to scan the area, looking frantic and embarrassed. Ethan quickly averted his eyes, not knowing what to say or do. This was not how he had imagined encountering an alien species. He had been prepared to find new life forms, but he hadn't expected to find a woman bathing in a secluded lake or to be caught in such an awkward situation. His mind raced. Should he apologize? Should he offer to help? But how could he help? He wasn't familiar with the planet's creatures or customs. The alien woman, still glancing nervously around, seemed to be growing more uncomfortable by the second. "You don't understand," she exclaimed. "They steal my clothes all the time. These creatures are always playing tricks on travelers. Please help me." Ethan's mind raced as the realization hit him. This wasn't some sort of confrontation. This was a prank. The creatures of this world, whatever they were, had stolen her clothes, leaving her stranded and embarrassed. I'll help," Ethan said, suddenly more confident in his decision. He tried to sound as reassuring as possible, though his heart was still racing from the unexpected encounter. "I'm here to help. I'll get your clothes back." The alien woman blinked at him, clearly uncertain about trusting him, but then nodded. "You'll need to hurry." "They're fast." She quickly darted towards the edge of the lake, where a cluster of tall trees grew close to the water's edge. Ethan followed, his heart pounding as he tried to process what was happening. He had come here to study alien life, not to chase down a bunch of trickster creatures. But the woman's genuine concern made him feel a sense of duty. After all, it wasn't every day that you encountered an alien on a strange planet. The woman explained that she was Zira, a traveler from a far-off star system. She had come to the planet seeking peace and solitude, far from the politics of her people. She hadn't expected to be so vulnerable to the pranks of the local creatures. As she spoke, Ethan couldn't help but notice the sadness in her voice, as if there was more to her situation than just stolen clothes. They followed the trail of disturbed foliage and broken branches, the evidence of the thief's hasty retreat. As they moved deeper into the woods, the atmosphere seemed to grow darker, more oppressive. The trees here were massive, their trunks gnarled and twisted, like ancient sentinels watching over the forest. Ethan felt like he was being pulled into something much bigger than just a simple game of hide and seek. Ethan glanced back at Zira. "These creatures, they seem pretty clever. Do you think we'll catch them?" She gave him a rueful smile. "They are fast and they're very mischievous, but I know this forest well. If we follow their trail, we can find them." They trekked on for what felt like hours, the sun slowly sinking lower in the sky, casting an orange glow over the world. Ethan's legs were beginning to ache, and he was starting to wonder if they would ever catch up with the thief. But Zira seemed undeterred, her energy never wavering. Then, just as Ethan was about to suggest they take a break, they heard a sound, a rustling from the trees ahead. Zira stopped in her tracks, her body tensing as she listened. "It's them," she whispered. "They're close." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever or whatever had taken her clothes wasn't far. With Zira leading the way, they carefully crept forward, moving silently through the forest. The source of the sound became clearer, and soon they saw a small creature, no larger than a cat, darting through the underbrush. It was covered in soft blue fur with large, glowing eyes that seemed to sparkle in the dimming light. The creature held something in its mouth, something long and shiny. Ethan's stomach dropped. He recognized the shimmering material immediately. "It's her clothes," he whispered. The creature paused, sensing their presence. It tilted its head curiously, as though trying to decide whether to flee or stay. Then, with a burst of speed, it darted up a tree, disappearing into the branches above. Zira cursed under her breath. "This is going to be harder than I thought." But Ethan, now fired up with determination, stepped forward. "Don't worry. I think I know how to get it down." Ethan's heart raced as he watched the small creature darting up the tree, its glowing eyes flicking back and forth between him and Zira. The creature seemed to be weighing its options, unsure whether to keep its stolen prize or risk the humans catching it. Zira, her face tight with frustration, shifted her stance, preparing to give chase. She had obviously dealt with these creatures before, but there was a calm determination in her eyes now that made Ethan feel like they had a real chance of retrieving her clothes. "We can't let it get away," Zira said quietly, her voice laced with urgency. "They're fast but not impossible to catch. If we split up, we might be able to corner it." Ethan nodded. He had no idea how he was going to catch a creature that could move so quickly and easily up a tree, but he wasn't about to let Zira down. "All right, I'll head around that way," he said, pointing to the left where the trees seemed denser. "You circle around from the right. We'll meet on the other side of the tree." Zira looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll trust you to do what you can, just be careful. These creatures aren't as harmless as they seem." Ethan didn't know what she meant by that, but he didn't question her. He had his own mission now, retrieve the stolen clothes, and hopefully not get caught by whatever tricks this creature might have up its sleeve. He carefully stepped around the dense underbrush, making his way toward the left side of the tree. As he moved, he could hear the creature above him, its tiny paws padding softly across the branches. Ethan wasn't sure how, but he could feel its eyes on him. It was almost as though the creature was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. As he neared the base of the tree, he could hear Zira moving around on the other side. Her footsteps were light but quick. Ethan took a deep breath and scanned the area around him, trying to figure out his next move. He needed something to trap the creature with, but the forest offered little in terms of tools or resources. The trees were far too tall for him to climb, and the undergrowth was too thick to hide in. That's when he noticed it, a small pile of rocks scattered haphazardly in the clearing. Ethan's mind clicked into action. He wasn't sure what the creature would do, but he knew one thing for certain. It wouldn't be expecting him to do anything other than follow it. He could use the rocks to make a diversion, something to get the creature's attention long enough to grab its prize. He quickly picked up a rock, his fingers brushing against its cool surface. He tossed it gently, making sure it landed with a soft thud in the bushes a little further to his right. Immediately, the creature's head snapped toward the noise, its glowing eyes flashing in the twilight. It hesitated for a moment, but then, with a leap, it darted from the tree and made its way toward the sound. Ethan seized the moment. He bolted toward the base of the tree, his legs moving faster than he had ever thought possible. As he reached the trunk, he could see the creature below, hopping from one branch to another, clearly distracted by the noise he'd made. Zira, on the other side, was moving in carefully, waiting for the right time to act. "Now!" Zira's voice rang out from behind him. She had moved in quickly, and the creature, realizing it had been tricked, was starting to make a run for it. The chase was on. The creature, now fully aware of the trap, scrambled up the tree at a speed that left Ethan in the dust. He was determined to catch it, but the creature was too fast, leaping from branch to branch with incredible agility. Ethan kept running, his breath coming in quick bursts, trying to keep up. Zira wasn't far behind him. Her legs moved gracefully through the forest, and despite her earlier exhaustion, she seemed to have a natural advantage in the woods. Her alien body was built for speed, and she made quick work of the underbrush, following the creature's movements as if she could predict where it was going. But Ethan wasn't discouraged. He knew that he wasn't going to outpace the creature in a foot race, but there had to be another way to trap it. He began looking around for something, anything, that could help him. That's when he saw it, a thick vine hanging from one of the trees. It was long, strong, and flexible. It was exactly what he needed. "Zira," he shouted, pointing to the vine. "Over there, grab that vine." Zira's eyes followed his pointing finger, and she sprinted toward the vine without hesitation. She reached it just as the creature darted across the clearing, and with a practiced swing, she grabbed hold of the vine and yanked it toward her. Ethan followed her lead, grabbing onto the other end. Together, they formed a makeshift snare, and with quick movements, they positioned the vine between the tree trunks, leaving just enough space for the creature to run into it. The creature, clearly sensing the danger, hesitated for a moment. Its tiny form paused in midair as it sized up the situation, but then, with one last burst of speed, it launched itself toward the vines. For a split second, everything seemed to slow down. Ethan held his breath as the creature soared toward the trap. Would it make it? Would it see the vine? But just before it reached the snare, the creature realized what was happening. It tried to veer off course, but it was too late. The vine snapped taut, and the creature was trapped, its tiny body suspended in midair, dangling from the vine like a caught animal. Ethan and Zira both let out a relieved breath, their hearts pounding from the chase. Zira was the first to speak. "You did well," she said, her voice softer than before. "I didn't think you'd be able to catch it, but you were quick on your feet." Ethan smiled, still catching his breath. "I've had my fair share of running after things back on Earth. Just never anything like that." He glanced up at the creature, now wriggling in the trap. "Now let's get those clothes back." Zira moved quickly, her hands precise as she approached the creature, speaking in a language that Ethan didn't understand. The creature's struggles slowly subsided, and with a final soft command, Zira pulled the clothes from the creature's mouth and returned them to their rightful owner. "I told you they were mischievous," Zira said, a touch of amusement in her voice. She turned to Ethan, her expression softening. "Thank you, I didn't think I would ever get them back." Ethan nodded, smiling. "Glad I could help." He paused for a moment, then added, "But I have to ask, what's the deal with these creatures? They seem like trouble." Zira looked at him, her eyes clouding for a moment. "They are trouble, yes, but they are more than just pranksters. They're part of a larger problem. These creatures are only the beginning. There are forces on this planet and beyond that don't want me here." Ethan furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Zira hesitated, looking around as if to make sure no one was listening. "I'm not just any traveler, Ethan. I'm a noble, and my people have been searching for me. They want me back." Ethan's heart sank. He had no idea what kind of trouble he had just stepped into. But he knew one thing for sure. This adventure was far from over. The moment Zira revealed that she wasn't just any traveler, but a noble from a far-off star system, Ethan felt a sense of unease. He had expected a few surprises during his time on this planet, but this was a revelation he hadn't been ready for. Her people were looking for her. They wanted her back. Ethan shifted his weight, glancing at Zira as she adjusted the clothes she had just retrieved from the creature's mouth. Her face was no longer filled with the frustration from earlier, but there was a serious look in her eyes, one that made Ethan realize just how deep this situation might go. "So, who are these people looking for you?" Ethan asked cautiously, trying to understand the gravity of the situation. "I thought you were just a wanderer seeking peace, but now it sounds like there's a lot more to this than I thought." Zira paused, turning away from him to look out into the forest. The trees here seemed to be alive, with their twisting trunks and thick canopies creating a world of shadows. It was a world far removed from Earth's simple forests. In a way, this place felt both alien and familiar, like something out of a dream. "I am a noble of the Virelian Empire," she said, her voice quiet yet firm. I left my people years ago to escape their constant politics. They are a powerful empire, one that spans multiple star systems. But their ways, they are not the ways I want to live. I came to this planet to find solitude, to escape the never-ending demands of my position. But now they've found me. They will not stop until I return. Ethan listened closely, trying to process the information. The Viorlian Empire sounded like a force to be reckoned with. He had read about such empires in history books, massive civilizations that spanned entire galaxies, ruled by strict codes and traditions. It was no surprise that Zira wanted to escape from something so oppressive. So, you ran away because you didn't agree with your people's ways? Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice casual, though his curiosity was piqued. What is it they want from you exactly? Zira's face tightened, and she sighed deeply, her eyes darkening. I was supposed to marry into a powerful family. My marriage would have solidified an alliance between two factions of the Viorlian Empire, but I did not want that life. I did not want to be a pawn in their political games, so I left, but I know now they will never forgive me. They'll stop at nothing to bring me back. Ethan could see the pain in her eyes. He had never imagined that the simple act of helping someone retrieve their clothes would lead to something so complicated. Zira's story, so far removed from anything he had ever known, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Her escape wasn't just a desire for peace, it was a desperate fight for freedom. I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice soft. That sounds terrible, but why now? Why have they come after you so suddenly? Zira looked up at the sky, as if searching for answers in the distant stars. I don't know, maybe they've always been watching me. Maybe they were just waiting for me to slip up. But they've sent enforcers, agents who hunt down runaway nobles. They'll stop at nothing to find me. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Enforcers. From the sound of it, these weren't the kinds of people you could outrun easily. They were trained, ruthless, and skilled at tracking down their targets. Why tell me all this? Ethan asked, almost before he realized it. I mean, I'm just some guy. Why would you trust me with all of this? Zira turned to face him, her expression softer now, though still serious. Because you helped me. Because you're the only one who didn't turn away when things got strange. Most people would have run at the sight of me, a stranger in the forest, and yet you stayed. You didn't even hesitate when I asked for help. That's not something I take lightly. Ethan wasn't sure what to say to that. It felt strange to be seen that way, as someone worthy of trust. Back on Earth, he was just a scientist, someone who collected data and followed orders. But here, on this alien world, his actions seemed to matter more than ever. It was almost as if he were becoming a part of something bigger than himself. But despite the weight of the situation, Zira had been kind to him. Even after everything she had been through, she hadn't pushed him away. She had trusted him to help her, and now she was sharing her story. Zira's eyes softened as she spoke again. You're not just any human, are you? You're different. You're not like the others who come here for conquest or exploration. You're not driven by a need to control or dominate. You simply want to understand. I respect that. Ethan couldn't help but feel a warm flush of gratitude. It wasn't often that someone recognized his curiosity for what it was, genuine interest, not a desire to take or exploit. He had come to this planet for science, to learn, to discover new life. And now he found himself in a position where learning might save not only Zira, but perhaps himself as well. Thanks, Ethan said, his voice a little hoarse. I want to help. There was a long pause between them. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped spinning. Zira seemed to be lost in thought, her eyes distant as she gazed out at the horizon. Ethan was aware of the sounds of the forest around them, the distant call of strange birds, the rustling of leaves, the hum of life that seemed to fill every inch of the planet. It was beautiful, and yet it felt so foreign. Zira's voice broke the silence. I need to ask you something, Ethan. I need to know if you'll help me, if you'll stand with me when they come. Ethan felt a sudden weight on his shoulders. He had never been in a situation like this before. Back on Earth, he dealt with lab equipment, analysis, and field studies. This was something entirely different. But looking at Zira, standing tall and unbroken despite everything she had been through, Ethan felt a surge of determination. I'll help, he said, his voice steady. If they come for you, I'll stand with you. I don't know what I can do, but I'll do everything I can. Zira's eyes softened, a hint of relief washing over her face. Thank you, Ethan. You don't know what this means to me. They stood there for a long time, just looking at each other. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but rather comfortable. A connection had been forged, something deeper than just two people helping each other out of a difficult situation. It was a bond born of shared understanding, of mutual respect. After a while, Zira broke the silence. "We should keep moving. The enforcers could already be on their way. We can't stay in one place too long." Ethan nodded. He had no idea what they were about to face, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back out now. Whatever danger lay ahead, he would face it with Zira. Together, they would stand against whatever the Viorlian Empire sent after her. As they moved through the forest, the air thick with tension, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of resolve building inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since he'd arrived on this planet, he felt like he had a purpose. He wasn't just a traveler anymore, he was an ally. And Zira, she wasn't just a stranger he had helped out of a strange situation. She was someone worth fighting for. The sky above had darkened, the last traces of sunlight sinking below the horizon as Ethan and Zira continued through the dense forest. The sounds of the planet had shifted too. What had once been peaceful calls from distant birds were now replaced by the sound of something more menacing. The rustling of leaves in the wind, the soft thuds of small creatures moving in the underbrush, all of it made Ethan feel like they were being watched. Zira, however, moved with purpose, unbothered by the growing tension in the air. She had taken charge after their brief conversation, leading them through the dense foliage, her every step precise and measured. There was no hesitation in her movements. She was the one in control now. Ethan, on the other hand, still felt like a fish out of water, unsure of what was to come, unsure if he would be able to keep up with the stakes of this situation. It wasn't long before Zira stopped abruptly, turning to face him with a sharp, almost unreadable expression on her face. "We're not alone," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Ethan froze, his heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" he whispered, scanning the trees around them. The shadows seemed to move, the trunks of the massive trees almost twisting in unnatural ways. "I can feel them," Zira replied, her gaze flickering to the distance. "The enforcers, they've found us." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure he was ready. He had seen enough action movies to know what was likely about to happen. He just didn't know how he'd handle it in real life. Zira was clearly prepared for this. She had been running from these people for a long time, and now they were closing in on her. "We need to move now," Zira urged, grabbing his arm and pulling him forward. They hurried through the forest, Zira's steps light and fast, almost like she had grown up here, like the trees and plants were old friends to her. Ethan followed, his mind racing with questions. What were these enforcers like? How would they fight? Were they as ruthless as Zira had made them out to be? Ethan wasn't a soldier, wasn't a fighter. He was a scientist, an explorer, someone who sought to understand, not to fight. But here, in this foreign world, he didn't have the luxury of staying on the sidelines. He had to help Zira, had to do whatever it took to keep her safe. They moved quickly, darting through the thick foliage, trying to put as much distance between themselves and the oncoming danger. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of wet earth and damp moss filling his lungs as they pushed forward. Ethan was getting tired, his legs burning from the effort. But Zira seemed unaffected, her breath steady and controlled, as though she were used to running like this. "How much farther?" Ethan gasped, his chest tightening. "Not far," Zira said, her eyes scanning the surroundings as if she were looking for something, an escape route, a hiding place, anything. "There's a clearing up ahead, we'll take cover there." Ethan nodded, focusing on his breathing, willing his legs to move faster. He trusted Zira. She had proven herself to be resourceful and quick-thinking. If she said the clearing was their best bet, then it was. As they reached the clearing, Zira stopped suddenly, motioning for Ethan to crouch low behind a cluster of large rocks. The moment they ducked down, a noise from the forest made Ethan's heart race. The leaves rustled nearby, followed by the faint but unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone, or something, was getting closer. Ethan held his breath, his body pressed against the cool stone, as Zira crouched next to him, her eyes narrowed, scanning the perimeter. She was waiting for the right moment to act. Ethan couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could keep running. The footsteps grew louder, and then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw them. The enforcers. They were what Ethan had imagined. They weren't huge, hulking soldiers like some of the warlords he had read about in history books. Instead, they were sleek, efficient, and terrifyingly precise. Their dark, armored suits gleamed under the pale light of the twin moons hanging overhead. They moved in perfect sync, their bodies as one, their steps silent but deliberate. Ethan could tell they were highly trained, their movements coordinated as if they had been doing this for years. "Stay down," Zira whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, his heart racing as the enforcers passed just a few meters away from their hiding spot. He could see the weapons on their belts, advanced-looking rifles, energy swords, and various tools for tracking. These were not people you wanted to cross. These were the Virelian Empire's elite, sent to bring Zira back by any means necessary. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of their presence. It was like the forest itself had gone silent, holding its breath. Once the enforcers were out of sight, Zira exhaled softly, her shoulders relaxing for just a moment. But Ethan could tell she wasn't fully at ease. She was still on edge, still alert. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice low. "They'll circle back. They're smart and they'll figure out we're not far." Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later they would have to stand and fight, or worse, get caught. But how could they fight against these enforcers? They were so outmatched. Still, Zira wasn't backing down. She had been running from this life for so long, and she wasn't about to give up now. They moved quickly again, taking another route through the forest, staying as low as possible. The distance between them and the enforcers grew, but the sound of the footfalls grew fainter and fainter, until they seemed to disappear altogether. As they came to another part of the forest, Zira stopped again, her body tense. This time, she didn't give any orders. She just knelt down and placed a hand on the ground, listening, feeling the vibrations in the earth. "They're regrouping," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "They're waiting for us to make a move." Ethan nodded, trying to focus. He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing: he couldn't let Zira face this alone. He had come all this way, and now, even though he was afraid, he wasn't going to run. Zira turned to him, her expression softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but sincere. "For everything." Ethan looked at her, surprised by the gratitude in her words. "I'm not doing much," he replied, feeling a little awkward. "But I'll keep helping. We're in this together now, right?" Zira smiled, her eyes gleaming with a hint of relief. "Yes, together." Ethan didn't fully understand why, but in that moment he felt a deep connection to her. This wasn't just about helping her survive anymore. It was about something more, something he couldn't quite put into words. But he knew he would stand by her no matter what. The enforcers would be back, he knew that much. And when they did, they would find Zira not alone, but with someone willing to fight for her. The stillness of the forest felt like a pressure against Ethan's chest. He could hear the distant rustle of leaves, the faint chirps of alien insects, but the usual sounds of the forest seemed muffled, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Ethan stayed close to Zira as they crouched beneath the thick underbrush, his body tense, every sense alert. The enforcers were still out there, and despite all their efforts, they were closing in on them. Zira remained calm, her face an unreadable mask as she surveyed their surroundings. Ethan, on the other hand, could feel his nerves tightening. The longer they stayed in one place, the more dangerous it became. He was starting to feel the weight of this situation. He had never signed up for a life-or-death chase across an alien world. He had come here to collect samples, to explore, not to be part of a fugitive hunt. But now, there was no going back. Zira shifted next to him, her voice a quiet whisper. "We can't keep running. They'll catch us sooner or later. We need to do something." Ethan looked at her, his mind racing. What could they possibly do? They were outnumbered, outgunned, and unfamiliar with the terrain. The enforcers had advanced weapons, superior training, and were now likely aware that they weren't far off. Their options were limited. "I don't know what we can do," Ethan admitted. "But I'm with you. We'll figure it out." Zira's eyes met his, and for a brief moment there was something in them, something more than just gratitude. It was trust. She had come to depend on him, and that made Ethan feel a responsibility heavier than anything he had ever known. "They'll have a plan," Zira murmured. "The enforcers won't give up easily. They're relentless." "Then let's make sure they don't get what they want," Ethan said, a spark of resolve in his voice. Zira nodded, clearly weighing the possibilities. Then her expression hardened. "I have an idea, but it's risky. We'll have to act fast." Ethan could only nod in agreement. Whatever her plan was, they didn't have time to waste. He had no idea what she was thinking, but if it meant staying alive and protecting her, he was willing to follow her lead. They moved quickly, slipping through the trees, using the dense foliage as cover. Zira seemed to know exactly where to go, weaving through the forest with a natural grace that Ethan struggled to match. He tried to keep up, but the thick underbrush and uneven terrain made every step a challenge. Zira was faster, more experienced, but Ethan refused to fall behind. He was determined to keep pace. After what felt like an eternity, Zira finally stopped and gestured for him to crouch low. They were near a small clearing, the light from the moons barely filtering through the canopy above. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as Zira knelt beside him, her eyes scanning the area with precision. "Over there," Zira said softly, pointing to a series of large rocks piled high near the edge of the clearing. "We can use that as cover." Ethan nodded, following her lead. They moved swiftly, crouching low as they reached the rocks. Zira gave him a glance, and he could see the fire in her eyes, an unmistakable determination. Whatever happened next, she was ready to face it head-on. They settled behind the rocks, their bodies pressed against the cool surface as they waited. The minutes seemed to stretch on forever, every sound magnified in the silence that surrounded them. Ethan's mind raced. What were the enforcers thinking? Were they just waiting for the right moment to strike? Then, a rustling sound came from the trees ahead. Zira stiffened, her muscles coiling like a spring ready to snap. Ethan held his breath, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. His heart thudded in his chest, loud enough that he was sure the enforcers could hear it. The rustling grew louder, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots crunching against the forest floor. Ethan felt a knot of dread in his stomach. They were close, too close. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, one of the enforcers. He was tall, his silhouette outlined by the pale moonlight, his armored suit gleaming with cold efficiency. Ethan's pulse quickened. The enforcer was alone. He moved forward, unaware of their position. Zira's eyes never left the figure, her hands slowly reaching for a device strapped to her belt. It was a small, sleek tool, no larger than a dagger. With one swift movement, she activated it, and a soft hum filled the air. The enforcer froze, sensing something was off. But it was too late. Zira sprang into action, her movements so fluid that Ethan could hardly follow. With a swift lunge, she threw the enforcer off balance, sending him tumbling to the ground. Ethan's heart stopped for a moment as the enforcer struggled to regain his footing. Zira was already on top of him, her eyes fierce. Ethan watched in awe as she swiftly disabled the enforcer's weapon, a complex-looking energy rifle, with a flick of her wrist. She didn't kill him, but she incapacitated him, leaving him unconscious on the ground. Breathing heavily, Zira turned to Ethan, her expression serious. "That's one down, but they'll have backup soon." Ethan was still processing what he had just witnessed. Zira was a force to be reckoned with. She had taken down an enforcer with ease, and all he had done was stand there, wide-eyed and watching. The whole experience had happened so fast, he hadn't even had time to react. "We need to move," Zira said, snapping him back to reality. Now, without another word, they hurried away from the clearing, moving deeper into the forest. The adrenaline from the brief confrontation kept Ethan alert, every sound sending him into high alert. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes now. They had to stay one step ahead. As they pushed forward, Zira's voice broke the tense silence. "They won't stop, Ethan, you know that, right?" Ethan nodded. "I know, but we'll keep moving, we'll find a way." He wasn't sure if that was true. But for the first time since this all began, he felt like they had a chance. He didn't know how they would survive this, or what Zira's plan was, but he was willing to follow her anywhere. The trust they had built in such a short time was enough for him to know that they would fight together. They continued through the forest, the path ahead uncertain. But Zira was resolute, and Ethan found himself drawing strength from her determination. For the first time, he didn't feel like a stranger in this alien world. He felt like he belonged here, fighting alongside someone who, in many ways, had become his friend. Hours passed. The enforcers were relentless, but Zira and Ethan were faster, smarter. They kept ahead of them, never allowing themselves to be cornered. And with each passing moment, their bond grew stronger. Finally, as dawn began to break across the horizon, Zira stopped, turning to Ethan. There was a calmness in her expression now, something more settled, as if the chaos of the night had passed. "This is it," she said, her voice low but confident. Ethan didn't need to ask what she meant. He could feel it, too, They had outrun the enforcers, for now at least. Zira took a deep breath, looking up at the sky. "We've made it, we've survived." Ethan looked at her, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "We did it together." Zira smiled, her eyes reflecting the first light of the new day. "Yes, we did." And in that moment, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. Whatever the future held, he would face it with Zira by his side.